Yo, what is a dude and dudettes? Remember this guy? Back then when I'm about, 15 pounds thinner. Yeah, I know. I need to lose some weight and everything because I'm generally stressed and haven't got time to go to the gym. We talked about where MMATLP is gonna go, right? So basically, if you go down to, you have to know this about MMATLP, in-depth divi analysis. There are a lot of people giving me a bunch of love and hates on this video. It was published October 18th, 2021. And if we check the time, right now it's May 2nd, 2022. I lay out three significant situations where the stock's gonna go, basically three scenarios. And I say there's the red line scenario, and then you will have the green line scenario, and you will have the yellow line scenario. And I told you guys that the very high probability is it's gonna follow the red line scenario and maybe the yellow line scenario, and then the probability of following the green line scenario is really, 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 really small. And guess what? About 6 months later, about 6 months plus 8 months later, guess what? This is what happens. This is and dwindles down. So I guess I'm right? Because it never go exceed the value of 1.96 in that case. But if you look at this, it's about 2.2, I guess. The top line scenario, and then for the green line scenario. But again, it's basically a graph. But in the red line scenario, it has a declining trend. And I'm telling that everybody that it's probably gonna worth about $1, right? Like around this period of time. And in that video, I'll talk about a 5 or 6 months or even a year holding period that this is gonna happen. And I warn everyone that whoever have this should sell it. And guess what? This is what happens. So again, I'm not someone who are doing things in hindsight. I'm quoting my previous videos to show you guys that I was right? So since you guys already been holding this, so what are the futures of MMTLP? The very interesting thing about this stock is, technically speaking, it's on the OTC market. So every market maker in the OTC market have a stipulatory cost, and it also have a, let's just put it this way. There's a cost for making it onto the market, and then they have to pay a certain fee. So in order for them to still decide to trade this dividend on the market, or preferred dividend stockholder or dividend holder, whatever you call this thing, right? That they need to basically establish the cost of this security. Either, a lot of people suspect that they borrow it from a bunch of other people, and then, because a lot of retail investors have a bunch of, these dividend shares, they just borrow it from brokerage firms and sort of cross-list it on the OTC. But that's kind of unlikely. What most likely happened there is one of those people who holds a huge amount of these dividend stock, they want to liquidate, right? They want to liquidate those stocks because they think it's worthless. So they went to a market maker on the OTC market, and say, hey guys, we got a bunch of retail investors that hold this, and I think they want to buy more of this, or they want to sell theirs too. So here's a part of my shares as a collateral that you guys can use to sort of put it on the OTC market. Shaban, a couple of hundred, shares, couple of hundred million shares, or just millions of shares that just all of a sudden get onto the market. And then some retail investor at the beginning be like, oh my god, I think the dividends was gonna worth more than $1 or $0.8, so they have to buy a bunch of them, and you have a huge spike up right here, right? And then afterwards, dwindle down, as more information comes in, people realize that it's actually not really, I hate to break it to you guys. There's no way the land is gonna worth the dividend for, MMAT, or this spin-off, whatever you call it. For those of you who are late to the party, essentially MMATLP is a spin-off for MMAT, which is metamaterial, listed on the NASDAQ. So MMAT is this, right? The dividend holder, if the dividend holder of a NASDAQ traded company have the same value, that means MMAT equals to MMATLP, that literally just means once the spin-off happened, MMAT will worth $0. So it just doesn't make any sense. So there's only two situations that's going to happen here. Is the private sector of the oil asset actually is worthless, means doesn't worth any money. or MMAT stock is undervalued. In this case, it's probably that the dividend holder will become worthless by the end of this year. And again, by the end of last year, they're supposed to address what really is going to happen to the dividend holder, or whether they're going to sell it on time or whatever. But they've already stalled it for about 6 months now, and they haven't really decided how to approach the retail investor in sort of telling them the news that, maybe in the next year or maybe in the next 2 years, we weren't able to sell this land to anybody significant for a significant amount of money. The reason being is the oil spike situation we're seeing right now is not going to be long lasting. And one of the only reason that a dividend tied to an oil land or the extraction right of an oil land will go up is that people suspect that, big boys is going to try to acquire this piece of land because the land is workable. But for those of you who work in the oil industry, or for those of you who don't work in the oil industry might or might not know, is in order for a big oil company to be interested in the land that might have a lot of oil reserve, is you have to have the condition for them to drill. And in this case, we consulted a bunch of consultants who've done oil extraction or wildcat oiling for a long time, and we've realized that the probability that this piece of land that material currently hold that are entitled to all these dividend holders, the price of this land are entitled to all of you who are holding dividend, the probability of a big company coming in and being able to sort of work on this land and extract oil right away is really, really low. So the developmental period of time for this piece of land to be workable will be over 6 months to a year. So that means in order for this oil land to be workable, you need to at least spend about $19 to $39 million into this piece of land to make it work. And because the oil reserves just got released and the general American market is in favor of a less volatile oil market in general, especially if you look at the futures. Therefore, even if they decide to sell it because right now the oil is spiking over $100 per barrel on the WTI index, they won't get as high of a premium anymore because the big acquisition period already ended by the end of 2021. And because right now we're on the second tax year away from 2021, that means the acquisition cycle is only going to start somewhere around September. But by the time of September, nobody knows whether Russia is going to back out of the war or not. And if Russia is going to back out of the war, then the oil price is going to go back down to around $92 per barrel or somewhere even around $75 per barrel. And the created hype or value of potentially having a high oil price market will trick more or prompt more people to acquire the land and the material what have. This will just becomes a bubble or just what becomes a fantasy. And this entire dividend holder will just be trading at around $1, right? Or even worthless. They might even take this off of the market. And as we know from previous news or news from last month, news from last week, from different brokerages, a lot of brokerages are starting to not accepting buy and sell order for this. And international brokerages are warning you that this stock might be too risky to buy or invest or even hold. And a lot of international brokerages, including one of the biggest Korean one and one of the biggest Chinese one and one of the biggest Malaysian one, are just closing out their holding position for this OTC position, which means for those of you who are holding this, no matter how big of a position you hold, once your brokerage firm or your prime brokerage firm decided to not hold this as a part of the custodian list, you essentially will lose all of the money that you invested in this. But again, we sold at 2.5, we sold it at 3, and I've been warning everyone, even though everybody's hating me on this, or telling you guys that I'm right all along, and this thing's gonna become worthless, nobody believes me, so be it. And again, we're not financial advisors, we do not get financial advisors, and everything we say on this channel is for shits and giggles. See you guys on the upside, and hopefully you're the one who listened to me earlier and have already preserved your capital, and if you sold it about $3, good for you. Good for you. See you guys on the upside.